That's the sort of bond that I think is so important.
Right.
People think, well, the Civil War is just this massive scale. The human cost of the war is well told in a story like that.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
And the cost and the demand, the sacrifice that war demanded. This is as much a personal war as it is a civil war for many of these men. It's very difficult.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios,
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. It's not the same starting without hearing that noise. The sound of the intro gets me going. Mm-hmm. We had a little technical issue, so the sound that you just heard opening the show is added in post. So I normally hear it because I have it right here, but anyway, you don't care to hear that. Today, we are talking to an old friend of ours, Stephen Evangelista. We were talking about this earlier. He has been on the show 5 times.
Yes.
Oh. And this is now number 6. He's written 3. He has written 3 books, all of which we've talked about on this show. The first one, of course, Our Story, which is the story of the lives and legacies of those who served in Battery B, 1st Rhode Island Light Artillery. You remember that from what year was that came out?
That was in 2021.
2021. Wow. Long time, short time. Short time, long time. The next one was Forever Silenced. Everybody knows the story of the Gettysburg gun up in the Rhode Island State House that has the round lodged in the muzzle. And this is the story of that. And his newest book, his latest book, which came out when?
Just in November.
Just in last November of 2025, is No Sacrifice Too Great, The Letters and Diary of Sergeant Albert Aaron Strait. There he is. And here's Stephen. Welcome, Stephen. Welcome back, I should say.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, I forgot to have you do this. Pull that armrest up on your right. Pull it all the way up and rest your arm on the corner of the table so that you're in frame. And there you go. Now you see, and then you just pull the mic so it's not in your face and right up to your mouth. Okay, thank you very much.
He's a professional. He's done this before.
So this book here, so Sergeant Strait commanded the Gettysburg gun.
Yes.
He was the commander of the Gettysburg gun. And I think when we had you on to talk about Our Story, we focused on the 2 men who were at the muzzle of the Gettysburg gun because they were both killed by the explosion that caused the round to get jammed.
Correct.
They were trying to load another round when that happened. But Sergeant Strait is the guy who went over to, I forget the guy's name now, the one who was leaning, Gardner, who was leaning against the wheel.
Correct.
Right? Okay. But before we get to Gettysburg, because the story doesn't begin at Gettysburg, first tell us about your story with Sergeant Strait. How did you first become aware of him? And then how did we get to this book?
Right. So most people know Sergeant Strait from that one day of his life, the Gettysburg gun. When I wrote Our Story back in 2021, there is a chapter devoted to Strait, but I had a lot of material that I knew at some point I'd have to do something with, and I couldn't put it all in Our Story. So it took some years and a book in between, Forever Silenced, to be able to put this book together. The letters and diary of Sergeant Albert Strait were 2 separate entities, right? There were his letters and his diary. And the thinking was, how can a 21st century reader really appreciate the experience of the Civil War when you read those 2 things independently? So the uniqueness of this work is that we bring them together in a way that creates a single lens that you can see both his inner world, his writings to his family, and his outer world, his diary, or his sort of factual recording of what's going on around him. And we talked about this a little bit, before the show. I think it's really important to understand that his son, Charles Tillinghast Strait, who was an infant when his father went off to war, he never knew his father, eventually inherited the diary and letters from his father, and did everything during his lifetime to be able to collect every artifact, every diary, every relic and photo he could of Battery B, 1st Rhode Island, in an effort to know his father. And that collection is the collection that I was granted unique access to, never before seen collection, to write these books.
And who had them?
Well, Battery B, 1st Rhode Island Light Artillery. And this was amassed over a long period of time, but they were never made public. And it starts from Sergeant Straight's son. So Strait has a very unique significance to Battery B, because if it wasn't for Charles Tillinghast Strait, who preserved the writings of his dad, and if it wasn't for Captain Phil DeMaria, who in the late 1980s was able to find this diary and these letters and protect them and preserve them, I would have never received or gotten access to them. So Strait is important for many, many reasons. He's sort of the entry point into the Battery, because if his son had not done that work, we wouldn't be talking here today.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a huge sort of origin point that we just need to acknowledge, that Charles Tillinghast Strait, who was just an infant when his father went off to war, is responsible for this material.
And through the years, whose hands did it pass down through?
Well, it passed down through relatives. But ultimately, the interesting part about this was that Charles Tillinghast Strait made multiple copies of his father's writing, and he placed them in different places throughout Rhode Island so that there would be some permanence to this, and it wouldn't be lost. The copy that I was able to get a hold of was at the Plain Meeting House. And this was where Sergeant Strait was a deacon before he went off to war. It's where he was married. It's also where he is buried. His father-in-law was the reverend at the Plain Meeting House. So it's not surprising that Charles Tillinghast Strait placed a copy there.
Yeah, sure.
A relative of Strait eventually provided a copy to us in Battery B, 1st Rhode Island Light Artillery in the late 1980s, provided to Captain Phil DeMaria. And that's the copy through which I was able to put this all together. Now, there are other copies out there. Some are sort of lost to history, but Strait talks about, the son, Charles, talks about putting them out there in different places so that there's an opportunity for people to be able to find them. We just had this one.
So the copy that Battery B had.
Yeah, it's a transcription, because Charles Tillinghast Strait transcribed the diary.
Right. So I was going to say, there was no Xerox machines in his day.
No.
So he had to do this by hand.
Yes.
And he did it multiple times by hand.
Yes. Amazing in its own way.
It is.
Yeah.
I transcribed Colonel Sheeds. You ever hear of him? So I'm friends with his grandson, and he let me borrow his field notes on the Army of Northern Virginia that he carried in his pocket on tours. And the book was falling apart and everything, and I didn't want to go through it too much and everything. And I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get a little notebook. So I got a little notebook, and I went through with a dip pen with a very fine point. After work, I'd go home, and I'd do a page or two, and I would just copy it verbatim, and I'd even format it the way he had it formatted and everything. Because I was like, this is cool. Like, I mean, it's notes, right? And it's stats and everything.
Right.
But as I'm doing it, I'm noticing a lot of these stats are different now. Like one of the examples was there were 4 Whitworths on the battlefield. Well, in 1960, whatever, when he wrote that, there were, but there weren't anymore. Right. In 2019 or 20, whenever it was that I did that.
Right.
So I thought that was, but I didn't change it. I would just do a little asterisk, and I would say, as of now, that's not the case. But I never want to do that again, is my point.
It's hard.
Oh my God. It is. It's tedious. And doing this is tedious enough. I don't need to be doing that anymore. But so to the fact that he did that, would you say 4 or 5 times?
Yeah.
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 That's dedication.
Yeah.
And especially dedication to the memory of a man you never remembered because you were too little when he died.
Right. Yeah, he was just an infant. He was just months old when his father left for war. I think it's important, maybe just for our listeners, to just set the context.
Yeah, I was going to say, why don't you tell us about Sergeant Strait prior to the war?
Prior to the war, it's important. He was born in 1830, December. He lived in Exeter, Rhode Island. Just a normal guy. His parents, Aaron and Abigail Straight. He's got a sister, Abby, named after her mom. He's got a brother, John. Just normal life. And he marries in 1856 Angeline Avery Tillinghast. And they have a daughter 2 years later, Laura Amanda, and then 2 years after that, Charlie, right? So, they're living in West Greenwich. Things are okay. 8 days after the birth of their son, Angeline dies of complications following childbirth. And this is where the story begins to sort of take the turn, because his wife passes away. He's a widower with 2 children. But there's also like the beginnings of a civil war happening around this time. So this is 1860, right? And so he feels this pull of patriotism, as many of the young men do, but he's also a widower. And there is a great entry, it's early in the book, there he's writing to a friend, and he says, I've seen some of the Rhode Island regiments come back. And, I'm not saying I'm going to go, but, I think it's the duty of the people to go. And there's no sacrifice too great for one's country.
Hence the title of the book.
And if you just remember his philosophy, everything follows from this idea that there's no sacrifice too great. He then makes a very personal sacrifice. Okay, in September of 1861, when he enlists with Battery B, he places his young daughter, who's 2, Laura Amanda, with his parents, and he places his infant son with his in-laws. So he separates his children, puts him with their grandparents respectively, and he goes off to war. And there's no, when you read his entries, there's no fear versus bravery. There's no dramatics. This is about love versus duty, right?
Okay.
There's a sense of duty that these men had. Sergeant Straight really embodies it for sure. But this idea that we must go to protect the government of this country, and we have a duty to do that.
Yeah.
And that duty actually, in some ways, surpasses the family. And he also says in this letter, I care little about, my body.
You're talking about the one to friends at home.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I read this part?
Sure.
Well, first of all, I think this is really in response to watching the first Rhode Island return from war, as he says. The date is July 30th, 1861, so they're coming back from Manassas, I'm assuming.
He hasn't enlisted yet. He's still a civilian.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he sees them. He says they look bronzed by exposure, but seem to be in good spirits, and think many of them will return. I have sometimes almost come to the conclusion that it is my duty to go and help sustain the government of my country. I think it is the duty of the people to go, and have tried to look on it from all points. It would be like parting life to leave, but feel there are no sacrifices too great for one's country. I value my life but little, though would be pleased to see those little ones grow up and be trained in the way they should go, but feel to put my trust in a higher power and give myself no trouble for this body if I am but acting the part I should. So he believes it's his duty, and that his life means nothing when compared to the preservation of the government and the greater good and everything like that. Though he would like to see his children grow up.
Exactly.
I'm gonna do this, for them, for everybody.
It's the first.
That
of
is
many
so
sacrifices.
hard for me to wrap my head around at this age. Probably in my 20s, I would have. But he's what? How old? 31.
30. He's 30.
30.
Yeah.
30. I probably still would have had a little of the romantic in me. Yeah.
But think about this, Matt. But his wife is dead.
Yeah. Right. And that's the other thing.
At Digital History Pioneers Foundation, we are about grassroots history on digital platforms. That means we are about podcasters, documentarians, YouTubers, and even TikTokers. All of these creators are out there trying to share their love of history with the public. They don't need ideas, they need funding, both from viewers and corporate donors. DH Pioneer's initial funding focus is on the Civil War era, with a special emphasis on the Addressing Gettysburg podcast. So be a vital part of the unique content Addressing Gettysburg has in store by donating at dhpioneers.com and help bring your love of history to the people. Digital History Pioneers is an IRS Section 501c3 approved charitable corporation that makes any donation tax deductible to the fullest extent of the law.
That's like another layer that you've got to think about. He's leaving his children now without the mom, with the grandparents. So he separates his children.
Yeah.
That had to be hard.
Either he didn't like his kids and this was an excuse, or he really meant what he was saying.
I think when you read the letters, he loved the children.
Yeah.
I think ultimately this desire to serve the country, this patriotism versus paternal bonds, patriotism is where he's pulled to, like many thousands of others from Rhode Island and across many of the states. I think in many ways, when you look at that letter in particular, and sets the stage, Strait is very representative of how people were thinking of that time. Uh-huh. There's another really interesting point that he makes early on in his letters home, and even in some of his diary entries, where he says, I just want to march, and I just want there to be a decision and resolution. I just want to get this done. This idea that we can hopefully get out of here soon. That fades as his letters go on. That idea goes away, and eventually he turns to this sort of theme about, if it is not my lot to return. He says this a lot.
He
starts realizing
nihilistic
that
almost.
This is going to be very hard.
There's I think it's called Pathway to Hell, or no, I don't know. There's something with hell in the title. You know how bad I am at remembering book titles. But it is, regardless, it's the story of Angelo Crapsey, who fought over on Culp's Hill. And it's very similar. Early on, his letters are hoorah, let's put down the rebellion, let's restore the Union. Mm-hmm. Even when he first gets into the service and sees action and stuff, it's like, well, it's not quite what I thought, but I got to get these revs and everything like that. But as the book goes on, you see not only his mind state or state of mind deteriorate, but I don't remember if they showed a sample or they said that you can also see it evident in his handwriting. And also the details of what he puts in a letter are fewer than what they used to be.
Yes.
But there are points where he's talking about, our sergeant blew his head off today, in the letter, and he writes that and sends it home. Yeah. And I believe he's discharged for obvious reasons. He's lost his mind and eventually, sadly, kills himself on a hunting trip with his friends and family back home. And when he was back home, everybody says he wasn't the same. He would get physically abusive with his stepsister, and he lost his mind. But how could you not? To me, that anybody did not lose their mind after seeing this stuff and going through this stuff that's the oddity. That's the thing that we should question. Like, how do you not lose your mind after that?
It's interesting when he talks about the rebels, or he doesn't pass any judgment. He's not let's go out and demonize. There's none of that. It's all about resolution. Let's just get this done.
Yeah.
He says that many of us will probably fall first, but we need to get this done. Because he talks about the privilege of returning home. This is early on. He sees it as a privilege to return home.
So in other words,
he knows it's going to be hard. There's an uneven cost to this, and it's going to be terrible. Yeah. And I think because he's very smart, and you mentioned something that we can get to maybe at some point. As his health deteriorates, and you'll note that even in the beginning of his diary entries, he has dysentery. Mm-hmm. He never quite can get past that. It comes back over and over. He's very well written, as you can see. He's very very eloquent at times. As his letters get closer to his death, I noted that there are some spelling errors where they weren't before. That they're a lot shorter. Some things don't make as much sense. He's obviously ill, but he's still writing to his brother. He doesn't write to his parents. He's writing to his brother because he doesn't want to worry his parents. When he has the measles during the early part of the war, he actually writes home and he says, I am better now, but I didn't want to write to you when I was in the hospital because I didn't want to basically worry mother. So he self-censors at some points to some people. And then when he's writing to, for example, his father-in-law, Father Tillinghast or Reverend Tillinghast, or his brother-in-law, he will give some very tough details. For example, after Gettysburg, when he writes to his brother-in-law, he never says this to his parents, but he says to his brother-in-law, I was literally covered with blood and brains, but I was unharmed. That's not a detail.
Is that in here?
Yes. Yeah, it's not a detail that he would give to I can probably find the page. It's not a detail that he would give to his parents. It's a detail that he gave to his in-laws.
Well, and isn't that, I mean, even if you're not sharing the details of combat, that's just, I think, a normal thing.
It's page 107.
There were things I would tell my friends that I wouldn't tell my parents, you know?
Right.
Because it's just, honestly, I just don't want to hear it from my parents.
And there's a call out on 120. On 121 is the call out.
So 107, this is a diary entry you're talking about, right?
Yeah, 107 talks about Gettysburg.
Should we skip to Gettysburg or should we wait?
Look, the Gettysburg campaign for Strait is so historic for him because he happens to be in command of the Gettysburg gun. That is how most people know Sergeant Strait from that one afternoon. What I wanted to get across in this book was that he is so much more than just the commander of that gun, right? That he is a father, he's a widower, he was a husband, he is a friend to many people, and he is experiencing the war. When he writes, he doesn't know how it's going to end. This is a really important point when we read history books today, or when we read about the American. We're looking at it from the end.
Right.
When you read his entries, they're very unfiltered and immediate because he doesn't know, and I think that's what makes a book like this very unique because he has no idea what's going to happen to him. He's only writing about that moment.
Of course, right.
Yeah.
He's writing.
It's just,
because it's as life unfolds, the story's being written as we go. Let's see here. So you're talking about the letter from Taneytown that he writes?
Yeah.
All right. Here, I'll skip ahead here. So he said, so we're skipping to Gettysburg for a second here, folks. The rebels charged our battery and others, and we had to retire a short distance behind our second line of infantry as our support in front gave way. Is he talking about July 2nd at this point, or July 3rd?
That's July 2nd.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the rebels fared badly, but few of them got back to the story. They were repulsed with terrible loss. I had another man missing, probably a prisoner, as the rebels were within a few paces when we left. Lieutenant T. Fred Brown, commanding the battery, was badly wounded, Sergeant Chase, and many others, but this was nothing to the next day's fighting. That's a good setup there. The rebels collected their artillery and opened a concentrated fire upon us. It was terrible beyond description. The air was full of shells, hissing and bursting. They come so thick, there was no dodging. 3 solid shot or shell before they exploded struck my piece. One of them killed my number 1, William Jones, and number 2, Alfred G. Gardner, tearing the head off of number 1 and the shoulder and arm off number 2. So he died in a few minutes. He died shouting glory to God and saying he was happy and requesting me to send his Bible to his wife and tell her he died happy. He was a pious man, and he and I had been tenting together on this march. That story, the way, I don't know why, that's one of the ones that still sticks with me about Gardner. I don't know how the hell, with your shoulder ripped off, you can scream anything.
Right.
Like, where are you getting the energy?
Right.
Didn't he also say he could see his lungs expanding and contracting or something like that?
The sort of wound that he received, his whole sort of left side was basically torn open.
Yeah.
And so, if you're Sergeant Strait and you're witnessing that, If you go to page 121, you'll see the call out that basically he's writing to his brother-in-law, and he says, go ahead and read it.
He says, this same shot took the head off of another man, William Jones. I was literally covered with blood and brains, but still unharmed. I have many reasons to thank the Almighty.
Yeah. So he's recounting the experience again, but this time he's actually writing it in a letter to another person. And that other person is not his brother. So the first part you read was a letter to his family. You notice how he doesn't go into great detail. Here he actually says, I was literally covered with blood and brains, but unharmed. And I want to point this out, Matt, for readers and for listeners. There's this very interesting dynamic with Strait. He will talk about destruction, death, all kinds of horrible things. And in the next breath, he'll point out something beautiful. For example, like this, there's a duality there. He'll talk about, we came into this town, it's totally burned out. There's no building that's still standing. It's a mess. But the peach trees are in bloom. It's spring. It's very interesting. And I think as a soldier, there's this sort of survival way to say, everything is horrible, but there's still life somewhere
still
here.
Beauty.
There's still beauty.
Yeah.
And if he can't find it in his environment, he'll write about it as the beauty in his daughter.
Yeah.
Or he picks a rose and he sends it to his daughter. Now remember, Alfred Gardner would pick flowers and send it to his wife. This is something that they would do. I think it's part of...
Didn't he leave one in his Bible or something? Like
he did press flowers in his Bible. Yeah. I interpret this as this is a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
Did they say that? No.
Right.
But I think they're doing that.
I think you're right. I remember my grandfather telling stories from World War II, and they would be, I mean, he saved the horrible ones for his own memory, but they were still stories of war, so they weren't pleasant. But he focused on that flower poking through the abandoned asphalt parking lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That beauty and that one little beautiful light in the midst of all the ugliness.
Right.
That's what he would focus on. And that's where he would smile in the telling of the story and brighten up. And so that, I think about that quite a bit. And especially as I get older, and I have to think that the reason that lit him up so much in his 70s and 80s was because in his late 20s and early 30s, when he was over there, that was what gave him maybe hope or joy or reminded him of home, something good. It reminded him of what is good in life because everything around him was not.
Exactly.
And so I think that,
I mean, you can even see the duality there when he says, it was literally covered with blood and brains, but I have a lot to be thankful for. He says, I'm grateful. I'm still grateful to the Almighty for having been, unharmed. So you see, again, he doesn't end it with that thought. He ends it with something a bit more hopeful. But everything that he writes about is very factual and realistic. There's no theatrics or and there's no pity. Well, if you look at his writings, there's just about this feeling of enduring.
Yeah. Well, so he says here, if I may, this is from the August 24th letter to Pardon. Who's Pardon?
That's his brother-in-law. That's Angeline's brother. So
he says, let's see here. Where should I go back to? I can hardly imagine. He says, I feel anxious that it may be my fortune to return with my country at peace, that I can take responsibility of their education, talking about his children. I feel it a responsible place, but still feel it my duty if I live to perform it. I have been hoping to get a furlough and come home this fall, but I see but little prospect of it now. I have not been to but one or two meetings in over a year, meaning church. The Sabbath cannot be told from any other day only by computation. I do not at all times enjoy myself religiously as I would like to. I often think of the dying exclamation of Alfred G. Gardner, who was shot at my piece at Gettysburg. His arm and shoulder was shot away. He lived long enough to shout, and he has like the full quote in this one, Glory to God. Hallelujah. Amen. Amen. And wanted I should take his Bible. Okay, it's not the full quote. His Bible from his pocket and send it to his wife and say to her that he died happy. The same shot took off ahead of another man, William Jones. I was literally covered with blood and brains, but still unharmed. I have many reasons to thank the Almighty. We have a very nice camp here now. We moved a few days ago and have got better water than we had. May God prosper and keep you in his path and lead you from sin.
So he goes right off to talking about we have a good camp, though.
Right.
We got good water. So let's leave it at that.
Right.
Interesting, right?
Hey, buddy. What's got you so down?
Hey, Court. I'm looking for a gift, but I just don't know what to get my Gettys nerd friends and family.
It sounds like we need to have a talk. Come on. You love this place, don't you?
You bet I do. It's my favorite place in the world.
Well, you see, at Addressing Gettysburg, it's our mission to keep these stories alive.
How do we do that?
I'm glad you asked, Sport. You see, Gettysburg is the gateway to the most brutal and crucial time in American history, so we interview experts, and our listeners learn with us.
That sounds amazing.
It is! Mike, are you f***ing serious?
What? It's for the commercial. What benefits do patrons get?
You mean besides up to 4 premium episodes per month and Matt being the bee's knees as host? Huh. How about early access to special episodes, behind-the-scenes insights, and discounts for ticketed events?
Whoa! None of the other history channels I follow do that for their listeners.
That's because Addressing Gettysburg doesn't take its listeners for granted and really cares about us learning American history.
You know, I should gift my Gettys nerd friends and family an Addressing Gettysburg Patreon membership.
You see, the answer was right under your nose the entire time.
Make Addressing Gettysburg's Patreon a gift for the Gettys nerd in your family this holiday season. Addressing Gettysburg wants you to learn about the Civil War with us, and we need your support. We'll run this ad until it gets annoying, and then we'll run it until you become a patron at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg or by scanning the QR code on your screen. Happy holidays.
The hell are we staring at?
No idea.
I think you have to.
Right.
You have to in order to stay sane. And I think that's the service that religion provides a society, is that to the people who adhere to them,
Right.
As long as they adhere to them in a healthy way, it enables them to endure hardship. I really think that's the whole point, right? Mm-hmm. So he's going through real hardship. You know, everybody complains today that they have hardship. Their air conditioning broke or something. Oh, well, poor you. Right. These people really had hardship, and yet they still believed in God. And it just makes me kind of like shake my head and go like, oh, I don't know how they can do that. And I think that's a very modern thing, is we think God is a genie who grants us only good wishes, and he's a puppet master controlling everything. And so why would he give a child cancer or something like that? And it's like, well, he's not. That's not what it is. And I don't know what it is, but I don't think it's that. And so I think these guys have to have something. And the ones who don't, the ones who say God don't exist out here in the battlefields, and those guys, they're not going to do very well.
Right. Straight is also a man of his word. He says in that letter that he wanted me to tell his wife that he died happy.
Yeah.
In this book, there are 2 letters that Straight didn't write, but were sent to him. One is from Adelia herself, and one is from her brother. And I put them in there because on page 112, you'll see Straight's letter to Adelia Gardner telling her what happened to her husband. And the Bible, of course, there's a picture of the Bible on page 112. The letter to Adelia Gardner is really important because he's now writing to a stranger. And I think it's important for readers to understand that when he writes to her, Matt, he says at the bottom of this letter, and I won't read the whole thing, but he says, I'll paraphrase. He says, I sympathize with you because I too have lost. I too have lost my loved one, my wife. So I understand. That's very smart. It's very emotionally intelligent.
Yes.
So he's writing to now a widow, and he says, I understand what you're going through. And he basically says, I have passed through the trying scenes of losing by death a kind companion. He's talking about his wife. And he tells Adelia, look, your husband was killed on my peace, and he wanted me to tell you that he died happy, and I'm enclosing this Bible.
Well, the way he describes, so this is now the third letter that we're covering where he mentions it, right?
Yeah.
And so there's always there's another piece of information with each one, right?
Yes.
So this is Mrs. Gardner. I suppose you've heard the sad intelligence of the death of your husband, Alfred G. Gardner. He died at his post as only a true soldier dies. He lived a few minutes after he received his wound. He requested me to send to you this Bible, which he had in his pocket at the time, and tell you he died happy. He shouted, "Glory to God, hallelujah, amen, amen." We shook hands, that's a new detail, and bade goodbye. My duties were such I could not remain with him as we were having a terrible battle. His left arm and shoulder were torn off. Why the hell would you tell? His left arm and shoulder were torn off by a cannon shot, also taking off the head of another man at the same time. At least he didn't end the letter there. That's the opening paragraph,
No,
right? Because, I mean, what a way to leave a widow.
Interesting, though, he also tells her that he had money on him, but someone in between the time that he was killed and buried, someone stole money from his pocket. He tells her that. Here's my point in raising the letter to Adelia Gardner.
Yeah.
He doesn't censor this letter.
Yes, as we just demonstrated, yeah.
Yeah. And here's what's interesting about
But
this.
he does censor the letter to his parents.
Mother. And his father, yes, and his sister.
Why? So why do you think it's okay to tell a widow that her husband had his shoulder ripped off?
I think it goes back to, and we don't have this in particular, but I think there's an idea that Strait and Gardner, he says they were tent mates, they had been together on this campaign, that there was a sense that there was going to be some honesty about what happened, that they had a pact, that you make sure that this gets home and let my family know what happened. And in Alfred Gardner's letters, he actually tells Strait, please tell my wife where I am buried. Please let them know where I am buried. So there was an exactitude, there's detail. And so I'm sure that there had been some conversation about tell her what happened, like literally tell her what happened. And maybe, I mean, we don't know for sure, but maybe she was of the manner of person that could take such news.
And he does tell her where he's buried.
Yes.
Tell us about his burial.
Yeah. So he was buried right at the stone wall, right at the copse of trees, right? So was Jones and some others, right at Brown's Gate, so facing the Kadori farm. In August...
Brown's Gate is the space in the wall,
yes.
the gate that they brought the guns through.
Yes, yeah. When you go out to
those of you who don't know.
Where Wright's Brigade's sign is. About a month later, Job Gardner, who's Alfred Gardner's brother, goes to that exact same spot per the letter. He tells, by the way, if you look at that letter, he tells her, this is where I buried him. So you'll know where he is, and they do find him. Interestingly enough, they also rebury William Jones, who's in the same grave, but take Alfred Gardner home, and they arrive home. Job arrives home with his brother the exact day, a year later, that Alfred Gardner had come home and told his wife, I'm going to enlist. So Alfred Gardner hadn't even been in the battery a year before he was mortally wounded at Gettysburg. But think about Strait in all that he has seen and all that he has witnessed. There is a great letter. It's the only letter to his mom. It's in September of 1863 after Gettysburg. He writes to his mom, says, I've been wanting to write to you for a long time, but I haven't. I'm hoping that you can sit next to Abby and dictate to her everything you're thinking about, and she can write it to me. He says, I'm in my tent, and they just shot 3 deserters. I did not go out to see it, but I could hear it from my tent. He said, I have seen men been shot before. I don't need to see them. I don't need to do that. And that's the only real detail he'll give to his mother. But the point is, even up until September 1863, you think about what he has witnessed.
Yeah.
Gardner dying in his arms, men being killed all around him all the time. What happens to the psychological readiness of a person by September of 1863? I say this from a universal standpoint. How do soldiers deal with it by that point? And I think they become somewhat numb, Matt.
Oh, you have to be.
Yeah.
You have to be.
You're like, I've already seen this before. I don't need to go out and hear it and see it. Like, I've done that.
Yeah, and you have to learn to laugh at it. And while you were talking about that, this happens once in a while when we do this. I was picturing, what is it? Really? Okay. He had his shoulder ripped off. Like we mentioned it, right? And, but I guarantee that wasn't a clean cut where it just pops out of the socket, right? It's probably a chunk of rib cage shattered as well and missing, right? Which means that as they're cleaning up the battlefield, they're not looking like, it's not like in a movie where you're looking at all these neat, overweight reenactors laying there pretending to be dead.
Right.
There's a shoulder and an arm over there, several feet from a body missing a shoulder and an arm.
Or a head.
Or there's a chunk of skull.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or here's a finger. These guys are being torn apart.
Literally.
These weapons are no joke. They're meant to kill, but in doing so, they have to destroy, and they destroy everything in their path. And that is destroyable, I guess. And I don't know. It was such a vivid picture in my head there of what that must have been like when that shell went off. And in that split second, a guy loses a chunk of his torso, another guy his head. They're gone. One's about to be gone. Mm-hmm. And what a mess. And that's one zoomed in part of that battlefield.
Like just a second of what's happening.
Yes.
And you think about, so that happens right before Pickett's charges. This is the whole artillery bombardment before Pickett's charge. When that Gettysburg gun, when the gun becomes a Gettysburg gun, when that ball gets lodged in the muzzle and the gun is eventually taken off the field. You think about, so Gardner's lying against the wheel, but now he's not because the gun's not there. They pull back, but another battery takes over. It's Cohen's battery, by the way. Mm-hmm. So now he's still out there. Another battery came in position. Who knows what happened to him then? When the battle is over, late in the afternoon, Strait goes out with a detachment to collect whatever they can. And it's at that moment where he retrieves the Bible from the pocket. But he doesn't do it. He asked somebody else to do it.
That's
Sergeant Maycomer actually goes in and gets the Bible. And they can't bury anybody there because the ground's still contested. So they go back on July 4th. And as we know, July 4th is just a massive rainstorm. Can you imagine what this is like? This really torrential rain, these dead bodies, and they're digging graves, which, most of the units did dig graves pretty quickly after the battle. So this isn't uncommon. And he takes the time, and you'll see this in the letter to Adelia, to carve on a piece of wood the name, and it says Battery B, 1st Rhode Island. Think about the thought process about, I'm going to do, we're going to be out of this town probably like in a day or two, but I'm not going to leave him unmarked.
Right. Yeah.
Despite everything. I think it's so profound. And maybe they did that for a lot of guys. But I think for Strait, it's like, I'm not going to let this go. And I'm going to write, as I said I was going to write to Adelia, and I'm going to send that Bible home. He just follows through on what he says he's going to do. And I think that's very noble.
Oh, I do too. And I like to believe that most of our soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen are that way. There's a sense of duty to each other first. And by extent, your tent mate's wife is in a weird way part of a family.
Yeah.
You know, you may have never met her, may never meet her for the rest of your life, but because of what you've gone through with this guy, she's important. She's an extension of him in a way, and their children too. And
in a very fitting way, when his body's returned home to the Plain Meeting House, at his funeral, this lady shows up in a carriage after traveling for probably days, and it's Adelia Gardner, and she actually attends Straight's funeral. No one knows who she is.
Really?
Yeah. Later on in life, she's corresponding with Charles Tillinghast Strait, who's now an adult. And she says, I remember you as a child. I was at the Plain Meeting House when we buried your father. And if it had not been for your father, I would not have known what happened to my husband, nor would I have received the Bible, and I'm indebted to your dad.
Wow.
So she actually attends Straight's funeral. That's the sort of bond that I think is so important.
Right.
People think, well, the Civil War this is massive. The human cost of the war is well told in a story like that.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
And the cost and the demand, the sacrifice that war demanded, not just on the battlefield, but on the home front, right? On every level, the children, the parents, the siblings. That's what I hope people walk away from with this book, is to understand that this is as much a personal war as it is a civil war for many of these men. It's very difficult.
That's another great question.
Are there other members of the battery who are as well documented as Mr. Strait here?
I would say Alfred Gardner does have several letters.
And he wrote like kind of a diary in the margins of his Bible.
Yes.
That's that guy.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
When he was in short supply of paper. There are others that do write. I would say that what makes Strait different and unique is that Charles Tillinghast Strait did great work in preserving this. Now, we do have some diaries. Stillman Budlong comes to mind. He has a very good diary, but it's very short. In other words, it's just like, August 1st, it rained. August 2nd, it didn't rain. It's great. And why those diaries are important is because when you triangulate the information, which I try to do, say, okay, well, in the regimental history, it says this on this day. Strait talks about it. Budlong has it. I trust that.
Right.
So they're important. They're informative, but they're not necessarily interesting.
No,
you see what I mean?
They're not interesting at all unless you're using it in the way you are saying.
Yes.
Right? Like as something to verify something else or a piece of information that you can go look elsewhere for and go, well, what the hell is he talking about? Oh, this must be it.
That's what he means.
Yeah.
There's an interesting point after Ball's Bluff where he says two of our sections were cut up very badly. Rumors were coming in all day. And then he says, in fact, it was one section. And so he actually points out that there are rumors out there, and he actually believed it enough that he wrote it down. And then he says, it's actually one. Can you imagine the rumors just floating around any unit on a battlefield or in camp?
Oh, it's like maids at the market.
Exactly.
Here, I'll give you an example, ladies and gentlemen. July 1862. First, the rebels shelled us very lively, hitting 2 of our men and killing a horse. Second, we were aroused about 10 a.m., or 10 o'clock is what he says, and immediately moved. It's probably not AM, right?
Probably not.
That's a little late to be aroused. Could be
early in the morning. I mean,
alerted,
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. He says that we were aroused about 10 o'clock and immediately moved towards the river. We followed the river as far as City Point. It has been a rainy day. Third, very muddy, remained in camp, etc. Fourth, very pleasant day. Moved back a little ways. The day has been noticed by firing a few cannon. That's it. So
those are your diary entries.
Yeah.
They're pretty factual, pretty straightforward.
But then, so that's the 4th of July. The 5th of July from City Point, he writes to his parents.
Yeah.
A big long letter. Not long, but a letter. And he's a little more detailed in there.
It's interesting in some of his letters, he'll say, I'm writing on my knees. I'm writing without a desk. I'm writing and my hands are very cold. He'll put these details in here that I think, our Civil War polished textbooks, we're never going to get these details.
No.
And that's what makes this so special. His diary and others, it's the small things that are the most significant details. The small thing. How observant he is. It's funny in the beginning, he's like, these are some hard boys. He calls them hard boys. They're drinking. They're not very moral. Like, he's not judging them, but he's like, yeah, it's a hard group I'm in.
Yeah.
And there's just sort of social tension because he's in a section where he's with strangers. And the West Greenwich people that he knows are in another section. He writes to his father and he's like, I'm hoping I get transferred, but if it's not my lot to be transferred, it's okay. But it's like, even then, it's like we always want to be with people we know.
Yeah.
Right? And he's like, and these guys, they're drinking whiskey. They stole the beehive and they opened it up and there's nothing in it but worms, but like they're stealing stuff. They're asking for money. He's not impressed.
Yeah.
But he's not judgmental either. He's not saying how bad they are. He's just saying like, what is happening here?
Right,
this is not what I'm used to.
Yeah.
Eventually he does become the sergeant of a piece and he's part of a section. And you can tell when he writes about his men and what he's doing, he's very emotionally intelligent. I mean, that's how we would talk about it today. He doesn't say that, but that's how I interpret it. When he talks about going to some of the burials of these men in other units, he says, I can't imagine what that would be like for these men to have died without the gentle touch of their sister or their mother. It's a very caring type of way. And when you think about he passes, right? He passes away at the Fairfax Seminary Hospital in November. He's sick most of the time. He's
63, November 63.
63, yeah. So just 3 days before President Lincoln comes to Gettysburg, right? November 19th, so there's November 16th. He had been at the Fairfax Seminary Hospital for about a month, confined to a bed 483. And he's writing even then saying, I have every hope of getting better. And so he's hopeful.
Yeah.
And he does not. So on the morning of November 16th, around 4:15 in the AM, he dies. And he doesn't make it home. And so many people say when I give this presentation, oh, it's horrible. It's such a sad story. Yeah. That's what this is about. That's why there's no sacrifice too great.
Mm-hmm.
He was the ultimate sacrifice too.
Yeah.
So were his children. So were his family. So were many of the people he served with. This war is about sacrifice.
Sure.
It's not glory.
No.
It's not honor. We think about it today like that. It's sacrifice, and it's about the individual. It's about people like Strait.
And you think his kids too, mother dead already.
Yeah.
And then their dad dies when he didn't have to. That's the thing.
Right.
He didn't have to. At least at that point when he joined. Maybe later he would have been drafted or something.
Right.
But he didn't have to go at that point, and he chose to go. Admitting that he would like to see his children grow up, but I'm going to go anyway.
Right.
Like that, I don't know. That's something that I can't wrap my head around. I don't even have kids, but I know if I did, I'd be like, I don't want to be away from them.
If I may, some have asked me, how do you know what he was feeling or thinking? There's a prologue and an epilogue. I write the epilogue because he couldn't write his own death. There's a lot there that we have to think about, and there's a lot of documentation about the Fairfax Seminary and did a lot of research about I even had what their menus were and so forth.
Oh, cool.
But my point in saying this is that as a father, and I'm so fortunate to be a father and a husband, there are things that that you'd be thinking about.
Sure.
Right? So you say, well, how do you know what he was thinking when he was dying? Well, my best guess is he's thinking about his family.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know what else you'd want to be thinking about at that point. So that's a pretty good guess. I'm going to stay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't think many people could argue that. Right? After all that was done and that he experienced, all he wanted to do was probably get home to see his children. And it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen. Now, I'd say one other real interesting point. I most recently have been working with the Virginia Theological Seminary, which today is the seminary, but back then it was the Fairfax Seminary Hospital. And the book, No Sacrifice Too Great, is now a permanent part of their collection.
Very nice.
So Sergeant Strait is back at the Fairfax Seminary.
Good.
Both in their library and their archives. I thought it was fitting to bring that book back to the place where he passed.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
What did he die of? Did you say what
Dysentery.
he died? Dysentery.
Yeah.
Man. What a way to go. That's so he dies of dysentery. And you said, where is he buried?
He is buried at the Plain Meeting House.
Oh, at the Plain Meeting House.
Next to his wife. So they send his body home.
Okay, so he gets to go home.
He does get to go home.
And he's resting there today.
Yeah. I visited his grave. His grave is right next to Angeline at the Plain Meeting House, where he wanted to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a really neat place.
You want to do any more? What's your next book that you want to do?
I'm actually, we're really focused on bringing this to the big screen.
Yeah.
All of it.
Oh, do you have anything going?
Really thinking about how I can finish the treatment for this film.
Good.
There's a lot.
And of course,
there's a lot to be thought through.
You want that in the hands of none other than us. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And even when Spielberg comes and says, I would love to do this film, you just got to get that calorie guy out of the way. You will say, my word is bond.
Yeah. And
no, Mr. Spielberg, it's time for you to step aside like the rest of your generation and support Mr. Calorie's generation.
Yeah. But, you think about the readership and people certainly have, the book has done very well. All the proceeds of the book, all three books, all go back to Battery B, First Rhode Island Light Artillery, put on educational programs for the public. That's the way I've always felt like that's the best education you can give.
Yeah.
But the point I want to make is that even though the book's done very well, I think, and we were talking about this a little bit before, there's a way to reach people beyond the page.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm bringing these characters, now characters, but bringing these real people to life. And that was another point about the book that people say, well, why didn't you just publish the diary and the letters? Well, because if I did that and you just read that entry from July 31st, 1861, would you have understood that his wife had died?
Right.
And he doesn't say it. When you read the prologue of this book, it's all pivoting off of one letter, November 2nd, 1861, where in it he says, 52 weeks ago today, Angeline bid goodbye.
Mm.
And so you think it's in his mind that this is happening. How do you build this? So I thought it was very important for the reader to understand the context and then also to write about his passing, because obviously he could not.
Right.
And it's a wonderful story. It's a very sad story, but I think it's a universal story for those who served.
What happened to the children?
The children ended up being legally adopted by both grandparents. They did get a sort of an orphan's pension. Huh? Charles Tillinghast Strait eventually became the secretary of the Battery B Veterans Association. He was also a postman, and became very successful person working with the Battery, and again keeping the whole collection. Laura Amanda got married, and her relatives live on today, and she had children of her own. So they were raised by their grandparents in a loving home. They were
but separate from each other.
Yeah, but they were sort of, reunited in their older years. And in fact, Strait says in one of his letters, please make sure that they see each other.
Yeah.
Make sure that they're not separate from each other, which is really neat because I think he realizes the burden was too big to put them both in one household.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's a little too much to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like considerate of other people and he can empathize. So the kids were they in the same town, the grandparents, the different sets of grandparents?
Pretty close.
Okay. So they were close enough to be able to see each other on a somewhat regular basis.
Yeah. Pretty close.
Okay.
But they're not together and they're very young. I mean, if you're Charles Tillinghast Strait, you don't even know who your sister is. She's just an infant.
Yeah.
Right. Until you're introduced to her and she lives here and she lives with these people who are also your grandparents, but you've never met them. So it's very interesting.
I can't imagine that.
Very interesting.
Earlier, I referred to a book about Angelo Crapsey. The name is Pathway to Hell, A Tragedy of the American Civil War by Dennis Brandt. That's the book I was talking about.
I'll show you this interesting house where he was born.
Yes.
That house exists today. It's almost exactly the same.
Is that which one is?
That's his birthplace.
So is that, there's two pictures, like which one's the modern one?
The top one. The bottom one is
the bottom one's the modern one, okay.
Yeah. My point is that people think, oh, these people lived eons ago and his house is right there.
Yeah.
That's where Strait was born, and that's where his daughter would have lived with his parents.
So what did the kids grow up to do?
One was a postman, and he worked for the city of Pawtucket. And I don't know what Laura Amanda did, but I know she got married. She had children. I don't know if she worked, but she
had
grew
a
up
life.
to be a young lady. And
did they ever? Now I know the son obviously was like the historian for Battery B, but did she ever write to any of the other guys or?
Not that I have any information on. He did.
Okay.
He wrote prolifically to everybody that he could to understand more about his dad.
Did he ever leave anything behind explaining his fervent interest in his father's history?
Yes,
there?
many letters to many of the guys talking about why he's doing this, and in an effort to know his father. And when the Battery men, in the 20th century begin to pass away, he feels their loss, really greatly because you become very close to them. And in fact, he's the secretary of the Battery's Veterans Association, but they treat him as if he is a member. And he's like, well, I can't because it's a great honor. I didn't serve. And they said, no, you don't understand. You are one of us. Your father was one of us, so you're one of us. And he took that very, very seriously.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of goes back to my point before about when he wrote Gardner's Wife. And living up to his promises to Gardner and what he would do for the wife and everything. Like, that's what I'm saying is like, you're kind of part of the family.
Yes.
If you're his family, well, he was my family.
Yeah.
He was my Army family. So you're my family now by extension, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Charles Tillinghast Strait is the only chapter in our story. It's the last chapter where he's not a member, but I thought it was very important to end our story with Charles Tillinghast Strait because he's the bridge to the future. He is what allows book 2 to happen, which is the story of the Gettysburg.
Story. Yeah. This one here, last chapter, Charles, the son.
Yeah.
And that allows for this one, how?
Well, because if it weren't for all of the writings and the collection that he amassed throughout his life and that Captain Phil DeMaria was able to preserve and protect and keep growing, we would not have had the documentation to write the only book, which is Forever Silence, which is an end-to-end story of the Gettysburg gun. Nowhere else does the complete history of that gun exist, from its manufacturing in Boston to where it is today. It exists in different places on the web, and it exists in different places in oral history, but it's the only place. And so I am extremely thankful to Charles Tillinghast Strait and Captain Phil DeMaria, because if it weren't for them, we would not have this information.
Right.
So my obligation is to be able to take these materials and put them in a way that people can actually read them, enjoy them, learn from them. I don't have to tell you, these collections there's a lot to go through. What do you include? What do you talk about? How do you organize it? How do you make sure it's right? That's a whole other level. And that's where I feel like I've added some value, I hope, to the Battery's history and legacy. Otherwise, how would you know about Straight if it weren't for a book like this?
Sure.
That's what I'm hoping history will appreciate at some point, is that it would have been buried in a box somewhere, likely, and probably thrown away, and we would have never heard his voice.
Right.
That would have been sad.
Thank you, Stephen, for doing this again. For writing this book. I love that you keep writing about this one battery, and the men in it and everything, and I don't know. I like that we're in this era of historiography that is focusing more on the individual soldier and what they said and what they did than the overviews. I used to not care about that. I was more like, nah, let's see the big troop movements and the smoke and the explosions and then things changed as I got older, and I realized what it really is about is these guys and the individual and the sacrifice they make, the things that they give up back home to come out and fight for a cause they believe in.
Exactly.
And so, as always, very nicely done. Here again is the cover, No Sacrifice Too Great. You can get this anywhere, but you could also go to evangelistabooks.com. Is that right? Mm-hmm. That's his website. You can get them through there.
Yes.
And what else is on the website people can see?
Well, the other books are out there as well. So.
The other books are out there.
Yep.
Here they are, Forever Silenced and Our Story. We're going back in time, according to the way I'm putting them there. And, of course, go on to Spotify or Apple Music or iTunes and check out Stephen Evangelista's music. He also does music. And it's just under Stephen Evangelista.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
He didn't even need to come up with a cool name or anything like that. He just uses his real name. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you enjoy this. Go get the book. You're going to love it. I know you will love it. You know you'll love it. If you already have the first two, you already know. You're getting a consistent quality all the way through. Have a nice weekend for those of you watching live, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks, Tad. He just waves.